Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
How's it going, gentlemen? This is your main man, Scott McKay, and I want to welcome you to yet another edition of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. You can find me on Twitter at Scott McKay, Real Scott McKay on Instagram, Scott McKay on YouTube. You can find us on the web at mountaintoppodcast.com. And as always, please join us at the Mountaintop Summit Facebook group. With me today is a new friend of mine. She's very charming and lovely. You guys are going to adore the living heck out of her. She is originally from Poland, and she now lives in Australia down under. Her name is Helena Nista, and she is a sex therapist and a tantric practitioner. Today, she's going to discuss with us the long overdue topic of self-pleasure, aka the M word, aka masturbation. So without anything further, welcome, Helena. We appreciate you being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, we're absolutely happy to have you here. Now, you're originally from Poland, so these guys can look forward to that wonderful Eastern European female voice on this show now, can't they?
Oh, yes, and my accent.
Yeah, I imagine that serves you quite well down under, doesn't it?
Yeah, people do enjoy it.
Now, see, the thing is, people come from Australia to the United States, and the Australian accent is equally mellifluous to Americans, I think.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that something?
I'm really not great with accents. That's the thing. I don't really hear accents very well, maybe because I have one.
Oh, yeah. Right. Exactly.
I'm not the best person to talk about accents with.
Well, for example, if we were to join you on a trip to Poland, you could probably tell what part of Poland people were from by the way they talk, because it's your native tongue, whereas we would be like, I don't know, right?
Not necessarily. In some areas, yeah, but all the big cities in Poland, people speak pretty much the same way.
Ah, okay.
Which was so different when I moved to Ireland, and I learned that each area and each town has a separate, like a distinct accent. And that was an interesting thing to discover about a different language and about a different country.
Yeah, well, the Irish people talk funny anyway.
It's a beautiful funny.
Yeah, it really is. It was voted the sexiest accent in the world, I think, was Irish, wasn't it?
Oh, wow. Well, I love it.
For me. Yeah, speaking of jokes, I don't know if you're aware of this, but years ago, people used to tell Polish jokes in the United States under the premise that people from Poland were pretty much stupid. And I never figured out why people from Poland would be stupid. And I've been to Poland, and people are perfectly intelligent like anywhere else. But, somewhere in the past 25 or 30 years, people stopped telling those jokes. And I don't know if it was because of political correctness or whatever. I think it just was a fad and it stopped. But I'm not even sure if you knew that went on in the United States. Did you ever know that?
I had no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. I know that a lot of Polish people moved all over the world after the war.
That's true.
So I'm sure there's a lot of Polish people in the States, but I didn't know about the jokes.
Yeah, some guy from Poland probably made an ass of himself in New York one day, and, it just went viral.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. You have a very interesting practice. Not only are you a sex therapist, not only are you a tantric practitioner, but you are certified to do body work, which means you can actually touch people when you work out things with them sexually, correct? Although you were telling me beforehand you don't do that often.
No, I try to do as much work as I can with discussion, with talk therapy, and just guiding them using their breath with different practices. But there are cases where it's actually beneficial for a client with their full permission if I do put my hands on them. So that's something I do occasionally as well.
Well, you said breath, not breasts, right?
Breath, yes, breath work.
Oh, okay.
A lot can be done with breath work. So I use that tool quite often.
Well, what is breath work? Was that a demo?
Oh, no. It was me gathering my thoughts, because this is a very interesting question. And to me, that's something I work with pretty much daily, but don't always put into words what is actually breath work. So the way I see it, it's a conscious use of body's natural resources. And when I do breath work, I guide people's awareness, the breathing pattern, obviously, and their muscle kind of control as well. So there's that breath being used to send awareness, relaxation, healing into different parts of their bodies, wherever they might be holding tension, trauma, wounding, abuse, etc. And so it's a very powerful healing tool.
Now, how does that directly apply to being better sexually?
The more we breathe, the more we feel. So there's a very direct connection with our actual sensitivity of the body. And obviously, when we're having sex, we want to feel as much as possible, because the body is capable of tons and tons of multi-layered, amazing, ecstatic, blissful, pleasurable experiences. And we usually only access the superficial ones because we're not breathing deeply enough. So there's that kind of pleasure aspect to it. There's also a better control in our sex that is related to breath. We can use the breath to actually control our sexual energy, control our sexual experience. Instead of just keeping our arousal in our genital area, we can use breath to send that arousal, send that erotic charge all back throughout our bodies, which then facilitates expanded pleasurable experiences, full body orgasms. It also allows men to control their erections, their arousal better, so they can last much longer. It allows women to connect better to their sensitivity, to their sensuality, and allows them to orgasm more easily and in a much more expanded way. There's so much when it comes to breath and better sex. That's why it's such a potent and powerful tool.
Well, it seems like it's a significant factor. I mean, you went on and on about it. Now, today's topic is self-pleasure, aka masturbation, as we discussed. And I'm curious to find out from you how you gained such an interest in exploring that and discussing it and teaching people about it.
I first came across masturbation coaching as a modality when I was doing my sexological training. And I immediately fell in love with the idea, because I realized that I was pretty much still touching myself the same way I did like 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And then I learned that actually most people do the same thing. They kind of form masturbation habits in their teenagers, and then they stick with them pretty much all throughout their lives. And that can be very limiting because, first of all, we don't really know much about sex and sexual pleasure when we're teenagers. And then second of all, usually when we touch ourselves as teenagers, we're still living with our parents. So there's that layer of shame underneath the whole act. And also we usually are in a rush. So we want to get over the whole act pretty quickly because we might get caught and we don't want to get guilted and shamed for touching ourselves. So when we form masturbation habits so early, they don't really serve us in terms of expanding our erotic potential. And there are so many different masturbation habits or ways to touch ourselves that can not only give us pleasure, but actively train the body to expand and grow our sexual, erotic, and orgasmic potential. So that means that the more consciously you masturbate, the more consciously you apply these different masturbation techniques, not only the masturbation experience itself is going to become much more amazing, expanded, and better, but the partnered sex is going to benefit as well, because we're basically training our bodies to become much better partners, to feel much more pleasure, to expand our orgasmic power, etc.
Now, what you just spoke about is fascinating on several levels, and I want to get to all of them. First of all, I think it's very profound that you would talk at length about how we are trained how to pleasure ourselves in an inherent environment of shame and a need for speed. We're going to get caught. We don't want our parents to walk in on us. I mean, that would be the worst, especially if our little sister walked in on us or something. Oh, God, it's horrible. So we do it in shame, we do it in secret, and we try to get it over with as quickly as possible just so we don't get caught, like you said. And it was amazing to hear you acknowledge that we really don't ever outgrow that tendency. We develop that habit, and then nobody or nothing comes along and says, hey, you know what? You can actually expand that. You can do something different here. As important as sex is to most of us, we really don't ever get around to it, perhaps because there's still that shame involved. And what you said in addition to that about how masturbating can help one figure out how to be better in actual paired sex is something that not everybody would agree with. Now, I'm sure you realize that a lot of these guys have read about something called the No-Fap Movement that is telling men that they should stop masturbating because it's costing them their sexual power. It's costing them their prowess in bed. It may even be costing them the desire to even have a paired partner. And then, of course, that gets aligned with pornography as a potentially bad thing for men. And then lots of guys are buying into it and they're saying, hey, you know what? I stopped masturbating for a month and I feel like a new man. Meanwhile, others of us are sitting here left thinking, you know, if I don't blow a load, my balls are going to explode. Biologically, this has got to happen. And I really don't see how the mechanism by which those balls are unloaded really matters, whether it's me doing it for myself or whether I'm doing it with a female partner, you know, having actual genital sex. How would you unwrap that whole concept? I mean, what do you think of the No-Fap movement relative to how healthy it is for men in particular to masturbate?
I don't consider it healthy at all.
Which? Not or doing it?
Oh, the whole movement is not healthy. So hence not masturbating is not healthy. We are sexual beings. Sexuality is a natural, normal, and healthy aspect of our bodies. And repressing that and trying to pretend like it doesn't exist or like we are not gonna to give it an outlet or an expression, that it just cannot be healthy for the body. And it hasn't been in my observation, you know, in my experience. Having said that, there are different ways to masturbate. So there are ways that don't serve us very well, and there are ways that serve us really, really well. So there's also the distinction there in actually how you masturbate, because I encourage masturbation, but I get then accused of encouraging men to wank off all day, which is completely not true, which is couldn't be actually further from the truth, because I actually teach men how to masturbate consciously, how to masturbate in a way that nurtures their bodies and nurtures their minds and cultivates their sexual power. And what I also want to say about the No-Fap movement is that initially, when a man stops to masturbate, stops to watch porn, and porn is a whole different topic as well, he might experience that kind of renewed sense of new energy in his body. And, you know, because he's not ejaculating regularly anymore, because he's not draining his body of that beautiful erotic power. So initially he might experience it as a great thing because, oh my God, he just stopped draining his body now. But the effect is not going to last because he is not cultivating that sexual energy. So, okay, first of all, there'll be this experience of my body's got all this new energy now that I was just releasing regularly before, and it feels amazing. But then with time, it's going to wear off because he's actually disconnecting from the whole erotic realm of his physical reality. So on the other hand, consciously cultivating the erotic energy and moving it through the whole body. That's why when I say masturbation, I don't necessarily mean ejaculation. These aren't synonymous terms. When a man masturbates, he can cultivate and expand and grow his sexual energy, and he can use it for many different ways, like nurturing his body, like nourishing his entire system, rejuvenating himself. Sexual energy is amazing, not just for our bodies, it's great for our minds as well, for our creativity. So using that energy consciously to bring it out in different pursuits of our lives, in our different projects, in work, career, a hobby, you know, anything else can be so amazing. And man can literally use his sexual power to expand his strength, masculinity, and energy in any area of life.
Could you give us an example of how a guy may change his outlook and indeed his actual practice of masturbating to better fit into that paradigm you're just discussing?
Sure. So a few practical things that men can do is, first of all, start using the breath more consciously. And what I mean by that is actually slowing down the breath, allowing the breath to remain very relaxed, kind of nice and deep abdominal breath is very helpful to expanding sexual energy, as opposed to just shallow chest breathing or contracted breathing that actually keeps erotic energy or arousal in their genitals and hence gives them that urge to ejaculate. When we keep sexual energy also known as arousal, just in our genitals, we naturally, like the body naturally will need the release. When you're holding so much charge in one area of the body, eventually the body is going to say, I can't hold this charge any longer. I need to release it. It's too much. So there will be that urge to ejaculate. The man, he will release all of that sexual energy externally. He will lose it. He will drain his body, and he will end up, it's a lovely experience. But over time, it leads to feeling really drained, and like maybe masturbation isn't serving you, as opposed to using our bodies and breath consciously, which allows that sexual energy to travel and move throughout the entire body. So that energy is actually actively nurturing the whole system, making the whole body feel amazing. And then when the ejaculation does happen, because it doesn't have to, like the man can actually totally feel or achieve full body satisfaction in a non-ejaculatory orgasm. But even if he does choose to ejaculate, he will not lose all of that energy. Like his body will still keep some of that sexual charge flowing through the system, meaning that he will actually feel amazing, nurtured, energized after his masturbation practice. So breath is the first thing that he can change, making sure that he's breathing in a deep, open, abdominal way in a continuous pattern, not holding the breath, not constricting the breath. Second thing is muscle tension. We tend to constrict the muscles, particularly around the pelvic area, the genital area. We hold tension in upper legs, in lower belly. So the whole pelvic region becomes really tense. And that muscular tension will also hold sexual charge in one area, in the genital area. So consciously relaxing the muscles of that area will lead to those sort of energy channels opening up in the whole body, meaning that that energy can actually travel through the body, can be expanded through the body. And then the third really powerful tool is awareness, where we're actually placing our attention. Because if the attention is placed either maybe externally when we're watching porn, and so the whole attention goes out of the body and it goes into the computer screen or a phone screen, then we're not present in the body. We're missing out on a lot of the pleasure, a lot of the sensations, and we can miss the point of no return. If we don't, if the man doesn't want to actually ejaculate at that point, he won't be actually aware where his body is at with the arousal. And that's why a lot of men ejaculate, because they're really not aware of how close to their edge they are. So keeping the awareness in the body as opposed to externally is going to help with the control, but it's also going to help with the level of pleasure that the man is feeling and experiencing. We can literally consciously direct our energy in our bodies. So also if the awareness or the attention is just in the genital area, the man is touching his genitals, he's feeling all the pleasure. But when his awareness is just in the genital area, just his attention alone will also keep his arousal in his genitals. So moving that awareness out through the body, feeling, noticing the sensations in his chest, in his belly, in his arms, in his face, his neck, his legs, his feet, etc. And also touching these different parts of the body is also helpful here, is going to help that energy expand. So just using those three tools, breath, muscle relaxation, and placement of awareness where the attention goes, these three are going to make a huge difference to the whole experience of sexual arousal, pleasure, and masturbation in the body.
Helena, I think a lot of guys listening to this may hear what you're saying and it sounds good, but it sounds an awful lot like a woman talking about men's orgasms from the perspective of how women feel and experience orgasms. In other words, you're talking about full body orgasms. You're talking about feeling satisfied without perhaps having ejaculated. And guys are thinking, I really can't relate to that. So please explain to these guys how all of that relates to the male sexual experience, because I think they're going to be unclear on that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I love that question. It's amazing. And the first thing is, I'm a woman. I don't have a man's body. I never have. I never will. I will never really fully know what it's like to have.
Well, let me tell you, having a penis is great. It rocks.
I thought so. I wasn't sure, but I thought so. That's great.
Yeah.
But the truth is, first of all, I learned a lot from men. Like a lot of my teachers were men. So they were talking about their own experiences and how they use these tools, how they expand their sexual energy, how they train their bodies to have multiple full body, non-ejaculatory orgasms. So that's one thing. Like I've learned from men with masculine bodies, with penises, doing these practices, enjoying them, and saying that they would never go back to the conventional ejaculatory orgasms. Because it doesn't even compare to the experience they're having with these more conscious, expanded sexual masturbation practices. And second thing is that I've worked with a lot of men. In my practice, I've seen one-on-one well over 1,000 male clients. So I've been teaching them these practices for years now, and they report to me what happens. Like they report to me their experiences, and it's just absolutely mind-blowing what they can experience. And sometimes I come across men who are incredibly lucky in a way that they might be just practicing these things for about maybe a week, and they have their first full body orgasm, and it goes on for like 45 minutes, and they're just mind blown and like literally shaking in theory because they had actually no idea that how it would feel. And yeah, they were curious, they wanted to expand their actual experience, sexual experience, but the experience itself blew their socks off completely. So these are things I'm hearing from men again and again and again. So I can't doubt that. This is evidence that I can't doubt, because it's just the proof keeps coming back to me with all these men applying these things and then reporting to me again, that they are experiencing these expanded full body, amazing, deeply ecstatic states of orgasmic pleasure.
Okay, I heard you mention 45-minute long full body orgasms.
Yeah.
That men can experience. I think you got all of our attention when you said that. Not that we all have 45 minutes to spare to have an orgasm with, and not that most of us would probably think twice about that, because I'm not sure we can actually physically and emotionally, and I'm not sure whether we as male human beings can withstand an orgasm for 45 solid minutes, regardless of how it works. But I would love for you to give me the first step on how you cultivate that. You don't have to give away your whole story on this, because I know that's probably one of your most closely guarded secrets, but just whet our appetites a little bit. What's the first step to move in that direction so we could experience something like that?
Yeah, I think you just touched on like very important thing, first of all, with like the ability to hold that kind of experience and pleasure, because a lot of people have this kind of almost built-in orgasm stopper, as in, okay, I'm going into an orgasm, it feels amazing, I'm having this peak experience, and I'm done. And then they kind of just like mentally consider it, okay, that was my few seconds of peak pleasure, and I'm done and it's finished. So actually, first of all, allowing yourself mentally, giving yourself a permission to stay in that state. And this can be tricky, challenging, maybe even triggering at first, because it feels intense. It feels like a lot is happening in the body. But actually saying to yourself, okay, I'm still in orgasm, instead of just going, okay, I'm done, it's finished, I've released, I can just, start cleaning up now and get up and go. To actually allow yourself to stay there, to keep breathing, to keep feeling the body, and just see how far the body can go all by itself without that orgasm stopper, without that mental block that says, I'm done.
Now, if you're counting the cleanup operation, I can see how it would go 45 minutes.
No, I wasn't counting the cleanup. And that's another thing. So many men go straight away into the cleanup mode. It's like, okay, I've ejaculated. I need, even like when they're still ejaculating, they might be already reaching out to like, stop the cum from going everywhere. So you're already like pulling yourself out of your orgasm experience into your conscious, mind that goes, okay, I need to not make a mess. Well, you're literally just pulling yourself out of your orgasm experience. You can't be orgasming if you're thinking about cleaning up.
Now, you know what? First of all, before you go any further, there we went again. I want to make it perfectly clear that you and I made a pact early on in this recording that we weren't going to lunge upon every single sexual innuendo that happens forth from this particular episode. So if these guys are thinking I'm leaving all these wonderful sexual innuendo jokes on the table, hey, just get in touch with the 15-year-old version of yourself, guys, and tell them to calm down, because it would have pretty much eaten up half this show if we jumped on every single sexual innuendo. So there's that. And I figured by now, with so many touching upons and coming acrosses and so forth and so on happening lots in this show, especially since, bless your adorable heart, your English is a second language, it's happening probably more than you even realize. So I just wanted to acknowledge that to my audience and say, hey, you know what, I've got my big boy trousers on here, and we're just not going to do that. I have to thank you for what you just mentioned, because I'm not sure how many guys really have pondered the fact that some of their orgasms are naturally lasting longer than others. It has something to do with how long it's been since you last rubbed one out. And even after you're finished ejaculating, you can indeed still keep the pleasure going. And you can also give yourself more energy potentially for a second round to happen sooner than later by limiting how much you ejaculate relative to the first orgasm, so you can go back for a second round. Guys who are a little bit older and more experienced understand all of these things relative to sex writ large, but what you're talking about is something different. You're talking about something that should have like a cardiac health warning or something. Like, if you have a heart condition, you may not want to like rub one out for 45 minutes and let your body just, go on overdrive here. But that's exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about having that pleasure protract itself over more than a half an hour towards 45 minutes worth, right?
A full body orgasm, or those kind of extended orgasms, feel a bit different than those kind of peak orgasms that only last for a few seconds. It's not like being in that peak orgasm that is almost like unsustainable for the body. That doesn't go on for 45 minutes. What can go on for 45 minutes is that energy circulating, that orgasmic energy circulating your body, which feels to me, and from what the men are telling me, it feels a bit more peaceful than that kind of high intensity, high energy, oh my God, like peak climatic kind of experience. So I'm not talking about something that's potentially going to put your heart at risk. And I feel like your body is it's got these mechanisms to protect you anyway. So when a man goes into a 45 minutes orgasm, I actually prefer to call it an orgasmic state, because it's something that typically lasts much longer, as opposed to a peak climatic kind of few seconds of an orgasm. And it's a little bit of a different experience. It's really, it's kind of hard to explain it, even though I do try again and again.
Well, I'm guessing, first of all, you're going to want to go easy on the caffeine and the Red Bull and vodka drinks before you go after this, right? You're going to make sure that your body is prepped for this, especially when you haven't done it so much before. It's going to be different, and it is going to be intense, I'm sure, if it's called an orgasm.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Okay. But also, it's going to grow slowly. Your body's going to kind of start adjusting to these more expanded orgasmic experiences over time. So typically, like I did mention somebody having a 45-minute orgasm within a week, but that's, within a week of using these practices, but that is actually quite unusual. Usually men train for a few months. And that means that the body has got time to embrace these experiences, get used to them, and is much more able to deal with them in a much more kind of peaceful way. So a full body orgasm can feel like a lot of different things, from that, electric kind of pleasure shooting out through your entire body up and down, which feels absolutely amazing. It can actually cause your body to physically shake, which is something that you can't even control. It's like you're off on that orgasmic realm, orgasmic planet almost, and your body is just shaking in ecstasy, and it feels amazing. But it can also feel much calmer, like blissful expansion of these orgasmic waves flowing through your whole body. And the reason why it's so hard to really give justice to it with words is because the brain in a way shuts down during these experiences, and it feels like a trance-like state, like you're in this full body ecstasy.
You're talking about some seriously good sex here, Helena, and it's
I
not
know.
even with someone else.
I know, right? But that's the key in order to have amazing sex with somebody else, you have to have amazing sex with yourself first. You have to train your body, you have to prepare yourself, you have to learn how to have great sex. Unfortunately, we're not born with the ability or the skills to have that amazing, most expanded sex. That's a skill that we have to learn, just like we learn any other skill. And masturbation is a great area to train.
Now, just to get this out of the way, in case the guys haven't visited the show notes page yet, the numbers match here, gentlemen. Okay, she's got a very pretty voice, and she is very good at sex, and she's also extremely easy on the eyes. So on that note, how have you, Helena, trained the men you've been with not to blow their load so quickly with you? Do you have skills in that area? Do you help guys be better when they have sex with you?
Well, the 3 tools I mentioned already, breath, relaxation, and presence, or awareness or attention, these are quite powerful. And so you're talking here about men I am with, not the clients, because with clients...
I'm sorry, socially, sexually, I mean in your personal life.
Yeah. Okay. This is a little bit more of a kind of delicate area for me, because when I'm with someone, I don't want to jump into a teacher role straight away, especially not in the bed. But
only if you have the sexy school marm outfit to match, then it's perfectly okay.
Exactly. But, I will give them sort of make little maybe requests, to slow down, for example. And, fast and furious sex isn't bad in itself, but it will, it typically builds arousal quickly and leads to ejaculation quickly. And that to many men means the end of intercourse. So slowing down itself is such a powerful tool, because we can go fast for a few moments or a few minutes, and then we can slow down and just go so slow. And that can feel so exquisite and amazing. And then we can actually just stop. And stillness is such an underappreciated experience when it comes to sex. And I'm talking still penis in the vagina situation, stopping completely, becoming completely still together. You can be gazing into each other's arms or each other's eyes, or you can just close your eyes and just feel that richness of pleasure and energy flowing through your bodies.
Or here's an idea: just stop and kiss.
Yeah.
While you're inside of her, right?
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
Really hot.
Yeah, it is.
You're bringing up something that I think is really valuable, and I want to expound on it just a little bit. Young guys unwrap women and just pound them like jackhammers because they're like excited little chihuahuas. And what you just outlined is the difference between a young, dumb, full of cum little boy and how a man makes love to a woman. I mean, you start off with deep breaths, like you were talking about, using your breath and using your touch and letting yourself feel into this rather than rushing in.
Oh, yeah.
And then after you build that sexual tension and energy and passion together, there comes a point where, you bend her over and pound her brains out and she screams and squirts and does all those things. But it's not the first 10 seconds, gentlemen. And that's what you're trying to say, right? This is something that you build up the crescendo towards, like a wonderful classical piece of music.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get you all excited. This is a serious erudite podcast. We're talking about clinical things here.
Yeah. Very, very profound.
Yes.
The crazy thing about that is that we all have that awareness there somewhere, that when we expand the sexual experience, it's better. The orgasm is better when we build up to it over a longer period of time. It all feels better when we take our time. But in the moment, we kind of forget all of that and we just rush to that release, rush to the penetration, rush to the intercourse, rush to the release. And afterwards, often we can feel a little bit unfulfilled or unsatisfied. Or
women just can't stand that, can they? Come on, be honest. You don't have to be Ms. Nice Girl with us. You can throw it on the table.
Okay. Well, women struggle with that. And that's one of the big
You're
reasons.
way too sweet. You're just such a sweetheart. It's hilarious.
Well, the thing is that men really want to satisfy their women.
Yes.
As a lover, a man wants to see that his woman is screaming in ecstasy, that she's having an amazing experience, an amazing orgasm. And yet so many women struggle to actually orgasm during sex. And I actually, in many cases, I feel like it's due to premature penetration. I'm not even talking about premature ejaculation here. I'm talking about premature penetration. So when you haven't warmed up her body enough that she's actually aroused, wet and ready, if you haven't taken your time with her so that she's almost like, begging you to penetrate her, if she's still kind of dry and, she might be saying like with her words, okay, penetrate me now, because maybe part of her wants to get over with the experience, or part of her feels like you really want it, so she wants to please you. Or for whatever reason, she might be asking for it with her words, but when her body isn't ready, then this is just not going to be a great experience for her. Women, on average, take about 4 times more time than a man to orgasm. That means she needs that build-up. She needs that warm-up. She needs her whole body to be activated and awakened, caressed, etc. It is actually possible for a woman to orgasm the moment the man penetrates her, the moment that the man enters her. And that is such an amazing experience for her, but she absolutely has to be highly aroused at that point. She needs to feel like her whole body has received the time and attention and touch and kisses and caresses and all of that, so that she is ready for it. Because if she's not ready, if her body isn't ready, it's just not going to be a great experience for her. You're probably going to come, but she's probably going to...
Okay, I'm finished. Let's go get a pizza.
Yeah, exactly. She's just probably not going to get there herself.
All right, let me go ahead and add something. Let me add a layer to this, because what you're talking about is pure gold to every man listening. If, gentlemen, you are encountering dry vaginas in bed, you're doing this all wrong. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's a step before unwrapping the package and relaxing and warming her up that's called mental foreplay. You should be flirting with her, teasing her, and that way, once you finally get her in the bedroom, she is going to be so hot that her vagina has long since liquidated down there. I'll tell you something. I don't remember ever having experienced a dry vagina. And I say this to women, and they look at me and their little eyes turn into little sparkly hearts at me like, oh, you must have a lucky wife. And I'm like, really? Is this such a thing where guys just don't warm women up and they're just not feeling it yet? And the answer is always a resounding yes. And I am convinced, after all the years I've walked this green, beautiful planet of ours, that it's because guys rush in. And they are very selfish about their sexuality. Gentlemen, if you give women that attention, she'll give that attention back to you, and you will love what happens. And as for guys, quite literally diving right into penetration mode, oh man, we're depriving ourselves of life's greatest gifts that women can give to us in the bedroom. She wants to stroke you, admire you, give you a blowjob, give you the most amazing hand job ever, and it's a completely different sensation. And it keys us up, if we allow it to, by relaxing and working ourselves up to it, to a point where when we do have penetrative genital sex, do the wild thing, if you will, with the woman, it's just going to be more spectacular than you've ever experienced. And yes, you'll probably last longer because you've given yourself time to warm up. And these are nuggets of truth that men just absolutely never get around to figuring out. And in many ways, Helena, women aren't ever going to help them. I mean, you're supposed to be the man. You're supposed to be leading in bed. Go read a book. Go get on the internet and figure this out. And yet they go and say, you know what, maybe I'm not so into you afterwards because that wasn't really all that good for me. And it's just really tragic, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And what you're talking about is so powerful, because a sexually fulfilled woman will be so generous back in bed, and she will want sex.
Outside the bedroom too.
Exactly. I see so many couples that tell me we still love each other, we're great together, we're the best friends, we like adore each other, but the bedroom is like, the spark is gone and we just don't connect anymore. And so the question I have to ask is, how did you make love that it led to the end of your sex life or to reduced sex life? If she is really fully satisfied sexually, she's not going to want to stop, because usually it's the woman that says, I don't want to have sex anymore at some point of their relationship. And the men are, desperate, frustrated sexually, and feeling like the wife is has kind of grown cold or whatever. But she's probably just grown sick and tired of unsatisfying sex. Like, how often would you like to have sex if it was kind of maybe a bit uncomfortable, not so arousing, not so pleasurable, maybe if you'd never orgasmed? How often would you want to have sex?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's a rhetorical question. Going back to what we talked about before, men who masturbate have this fear that they're going to lose their masculine energy. I think there's something to be said for not masturbating before you go out on a date that may turn sexual, not only because you're going to have to perhaps perform sexually later, but I do think there's an element of masculine sexual aura and energy that comes from being horny. But see, where I would limit it, the parameters I would put on that would be to say, yeah, as long as you're feeling as if you could be horny right now, that masculine energy is going to be there. I don't think you have to store it up for an entire month to feel like a lion under there and to act like one on the outside. But there is something to that, isn't there? When we're horny, we're just sexier. And I think that goes for women also, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And something else I teach is actually how to hold onto that arousal and how to cherish it and move it through the body without kind of aggressively throwing it at the woman in front of you.
Yes.
Because so many men don't really know how to deal with their arousal, and they meet a beautiful woman and that arousal is actually frustrating. It sits in their genitals. They kind of want to have sex with her and release that energy. And that's frustrating. They walk away feeling unfulfilled. Whereas they could actually...
Or they act like creeps.
Yeah, it can, exactly. It can almost control our behavior in a way that, the desire is so strong.
And Helena, not to interrupt you a second time, but this is important. Mm-hmm. That's the difference between little boys and grown men also.
Yeah.
100%. You show me a guy who gets into a situation where he's sexually pressuring a woman because he literally can't keep his pants on. And that is a turnoff to a woman, not simply because she feels like her safety is being violated, but just because it's unattractive inherently.
Yeah.
It's little boy stuff where a man can hold on to that sexual energy and really feel it and enjoy it. Much in the same way women do. I mean, women love being horny. And guys really a lot of times don't grasp that concept. They're thinking, well, you know what? Women must just be a lot different than we are. Because if I'm horny, man, boing, I spring one and I'm ready to hit it. And by the same token, men also fail to recognize they can be out on a date with a woman and by using his voice and flirting with her and being romantic, she could be squirming in her panties on the other side of the table. And he'll never know it, and she'll never reveal it. But I don't honestly think, once you cut past all the societal trappings, I don't think we're all that much different. I think guys feel that little nitrogen bubble of horniness just like women do. And I think if we have the wherewithal, we can let it simmer like we would a really good dish on the stove that takes a couple hours, like a good spaghetti sauce. It takes a while to get all the flavors and all the spices melded together. I think male-female sexual tension is exactly like that, culminating in this wonderful dining experience later,
Exactly. And you're right. An aroused person who is holding on to their arousal and who knows consciously how to cherish it, how to move it through their bodies, they radiate something really beautiful and deeply attractive.
Yes.
When I feel deeply aroused and I'm walking down the street, men look at me, men stop me and want to talk to me. It's beautiful. It gives me confidence, makes me feel amazing. And I teach that to men as well. And men can do it. I know because they're reporting to me their experiences with it. So it's not just a woman or just a female thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the female thing, I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about women's masturbation patterns before we close out this podcast. I think a lot of guys fail to believe that women like sex at all, let alone that they actually enjoy pleasuring themselves. I mean, you can see these women on porn doing it. There's interview porn where the guy always asks, oh, do you pleasure yourself? And the woman's like, yeah, sure, 5 times a day. And they're like, yeah, well, she's just an actress. But nevertheless, there are these slumber parties held for women's night out where they talk about sex all night and buy hundreds of dollars worth of sex creams and gadgets and butterfly bunny ear toys and really dangerous looking vibrators women are horny little creatures also, just like we are, and they do like to pleasure themselves.
Oh my God, so true.
Do women feel more or less shame about that than we do? And, what is the truth about women's masturbation habits?
I think women are a bit more strongly repressed than men around their sexuality, because there's this whole training around, when girls are little, around the whole topic of don't be a slut, keep your legs together, don't touch yourself, don't let the boys touch you, etc. Whereas for boys, even though they're still repressed and they still, their masturbation, their erections are covered in shame, I feel like there is probably there's a bit of a more permission for that. Oh yeah, it's just boys will be boys. Having said that, both sexes are definitely inhibited and repressed in this way, but women can hold so many toxic beliefs and ideas about their sexuality and how they need to be seen as mother figures, wife figures, not the horny sluts. The word slut, like, there's such a negative connotation to this word, such a negative term, but really it just describes a woman who enjoys sex, who cherishes her sexuality and admits to it and enjoys it freely. What's wrong with that? But the society, by using this kind of terms and giving women this kind of ideas and messages, is like telling them loud and clear, it's not okay to be a sexual woman because you're going to be seen as a whore. Yeah, and women don't want that. That's why they're more hidden, like they're hiding their sexual desires a bit more than men.
Now, I think most guys listening would agree, Helena, that we are very turned on by the visual image of a woman masturbating. You see the porn movies with Sibian machines and women just screaming in pleasure, playing with themselves. And that's really hot to us. How do women feel about men masturbating? Is that concept sexy and hot and potentially horny to them, or is it gross? Because I think a lot of guys think, if a woman ever caught me masturbating, it would make her just vomit in her mouth. What's the truth there?
Women don't usually realize the truth about our sexual nature. And so their perception is that their partners shouldn't masturbate, because if he masturbates, that means that he is not attracted to me enough, or that I don't satisfy him enough. So it's not a gross experience, but it's more of a threat, as in he doesn't find me attractive anymore and, I don't fulfill him. So that's more why women are not excited about their men masturbating.
Is that a myth or is that valid, do you think?
Oh, it's a complete myth.
To me, you're in another country. You're in Australia. Okay.
Yeah.
But, and I don't know where you live in Australia, but let's say you were to come to America where we have wonderful Mexican food. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I take you somewhere to dinner with Emily, of course. And we get ourselves some fantastic Mexican food. You may be surprised to find that we have cheap-ass Taco Bell restaurants in San Antonio also. Because after all, isn't that like low-end, cheap, fake, Americanized Mexican food? Well, surprise, surprise, they have Taco Bell in Mexico too. Why? Because it's a completely separate genre that's just remotely sort of related to each other. I think that's how most men and women, if you really delve into our souls, feel about masturbation, even masturbation to porn, versus having real life sex with someone else. They're not really the same thing. They're like two different avenues of sexual pleasure, but one doesn't really substitute for the other. And of course, that certainly contributes to guys who are self-described incels and aren't having any real sex with women. That can make them feel frustrated that all they have to eat is Taco Bell all the time, for sure. But wouldn't you agree that those two situations, those two sexual circumstances, don't necessarily correlate to each other exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with that.
Yeah.
These, masturbation and partnered sex are not an either-or situation.
True.
These are two valid sexual experiences. And like I mentioned before, you have to be having great sex with yourself first so that you can have a great partnered sex. People associate a lot of stigma with masturbation. Oh, masturbation is only for lonely people, or people who can't get a partner, maybe people who lost their partner and are too old to get a new partner, etc. So it's seen like a lesser kind of sexual experience in the social general view, whereas it's a very valid, beautiful thing to have sex with yourself. And people in relationships should never stop masturbating. And again, there is that kind of idea, oh, I have a partner now, why should I masturbate?
Well, I mean, let's be realistic. If you have the guts to, masturbating in front of your partners masturbating with each other is extremely hot.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also a great, apart from it being a hot experience and really awesome to see your partner touching themselves in that kind of deep, amazing pleasure, it's also a great educational tool to see how your partner touches themselves, what kind of pressure they use, what kind of places they touch, how they use their fingers, etc. Do they use lube or not? And, all of that is great information for you to give them more pleasure in the future, because you might have some ideas about how to touch your partner. Maybe they were able to communicate certain things about what they like, but to actually see them touching themselves, that is such a great source of information.
Man, is that ever an underrated point? Man, that could be the main takeaway from this entire show. No kidding. We're running out of time here. We could talk about this for hours. I think these guys could listen to your voice for hours. But alas, we have to bring this show to a close at some point. And what better way to do that than to point these guys to your masturbation course, which they can find on your website. And, obviously you're going to teach them the details. I almost said the ins and outs, but the details of how to pleasure themselves to a much greater and more evolved and awakened degree, as it were, than they ever have. And I'm sure you have a lot of tantra tied into that. So these guys probably literally can't wait to get their hands on this. There I go again. www.mountaintoppodcast.com. Helena, Helena, it's 6 letters, Helen with an A on the end. And what else can these guys find when they dig into your masturbation course, Helena?
Well, the masturbation coaching course, it's an online course. It's a 7-week online course with a lot of homework practice.
My goodness, if these guys are trying to jack off as quickly as possible, how do you expect them to hold up 7 weeks? They're going to want it now like freaking Veruca Salt. Come on.
Oh, it's a gradual process of adding different elements to their masturbation practice in order to build on it and expand it. So,
in other words, you're going to learn to be patient, damn it. I will teach you how to learn to be patient.
Exactly. But it's an amazing look at what masturbation can actually be. And to go through the 7 weeks and to do all the homework and take your body through these different ways of being touched and felt and experienced, that actually rewires the nervous system. That changes the body's sensuality and ability to feel and experience sex and sexual pleasure. So it's a great resource for both masturbation and partner sex. And that's how it's structured. It's structured as a journey.
Yeah, it sounds like it's not only worthwhile, but kind of a lot of fun too. So guys, go to mountaintoppodcast.com/Helena, Helena, and get you some. She's got a 50% coupon for you there too, just for you guys because you're so sexy and cool. And speaking of which, I want to thank you for being so charming and wonderful and so willing to talk about what is really a shameful, touchy topic for people with such well thought out truth for these guys. I think you've done a great job, and I think guys are going to be very impressed with what they've heard. Thank you, Helena.
Thank you so much. It's my absolute pleasure.
Here we go again. And it is absolutely our pleasure also. You have no idea. So once again, guys, if you haven't been to Mountaintop Podcast before, we have a lot of fun on these shows, but ultimately this is all about you. This is about your life, your best life, being the man you were born to be. Do you feel like you're just living a shadow of what you should be living? Are you feeling like, there's more for you? There's a bigger dream. There's a sexier woman who is going to bring joy to your life instead of pain, instead of misery. Are these the things that are eating at your soul? If so, if any way, shape, or form any of that's true, if you can relate to what I just talked about at all, go to mountaintoppodcast.com, click on the red button in the upper right-hand corner, and talk to me about it for 25 minutes. I'm as Real as the day is long. I do not play a fictional character on this show, and I will be able to talk to you, be vulnerable with you about some of the things that have happened in my life so we can figure out where to make the changes in your life, put a plan of action together that's going to make sure you get the results you finally wanted. Guys, every man I've ever invited to work with me one-on-one has gotten results. It's guaranteed. That's because we talk first and I get a grasp of who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, and we get on that road, we put that plan of action together, and we make it happen. If that sounds exciting to you, go to mountaintoppodcast.com, click on the upper right-hand corner. There's a red button there where you can sign up to talk to me for absolutely free. It won't cost you a dime for 25 minutes, and we'll put that plan together for you. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.